Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Amazing.
I had to go get my headphones, and literally I ran down 2 flights of stairs and yanked them off of my daughter's head.
Dan Finamore is PEM's curator of maritime art and history.
The kids are trapped in the house. I think it's fair to say that's driving them crazy. My 15-year-old son insists that this isn't a school day, it's a vacation. So far he's winning that battle, I would point out.
Dan oversees one of the country's oldest and most important maritime collections. Because of the pandemic, he's had to do this from home.
So, this is simple. I would just love you to tell the story of the flag.
Okay. So I had to get out of the house. So I headed down to the waterfront, got down there, saw the flagpole, and realized that the Park Service was flying a bright, solid yellow flag.
And for those of us who aren't schooled in the language of international maritime signal flags, a yellow flag stands for the letter Q, also known as Quebec, or more interestingly, quarantine.
So the Park Service staff that decided to fly that flag, I think they're sending a positive message to the people of Salem and wishing us all well and good health.
Okay, so can you just tell me your name and title again?
My name's John Newman, shiprigger and first mate on the Friendship of Salem, a historic replica of a 1797 Salem-built merchant ship.
John and I are standing in front of a wet and rainy Salem harbor. Our masks make it difficult to talk and even more difficult to record.
And we're about to take down our quarantine flag because it's an old antique flag and there's a storm coming. It's kind of like a steady reminder that these are no ordinary times. I think we need that reminding a little bit, as
Yep.
Those are just basic precautions to take that everybody can take.
From the windy harbor in Salem, Massachusetts, this is the PEMcast. As of this recording, we are in our 3rd month of the COVID-19 quarantine.
Those of us fortunate enough to stay home are adjusting to the new normal of stocking our shelves, waiting it out, trying to find ways to keep ourselves active both physically and mentally.
It's a lot like the preparations and then the experience of being at sea.
As someone who can ID a 100-year-old quarantine flag, Dan was able to easily draw parallels between our predicament today and the plight of a 19th century mariner.
The types of food that were brought on board were intended to be well preserved. It's only when you approach an island they would get the cooper to build casks from all of the parts down below, and they would row a boat into the island and look for fresh water.
And then there were the confines of a vessel sailing for months at sea.
The crew was restricted to certain parts of the ship, the officers in other areas, so it was somewhat of a hierarchical kind of arrangement. On board a small vessel that could have been anywhere from 40 to 80 feet long.
And if the weather was good, you may get to stand at the rail and look out at the vastness of the ocean.
But most of the time you were confined with all of these other people. So a really funny kind of contrast between an expansive environment but the physical constraints of a really limited one.
In 1864, after nearly 2 weeks without any wind in his sails, poet James Russell Lowell famously said, "There is nothing so desperately monotonous as the sea, and I no longer wonder at the cruelty of pirates."
When you read the journals of the green hands, the sailors who were on their first voyages, they really usually express terrible surprise for being so constrained.
And while the constraints of the quarantine in 2020 have led to the popularity of TikTok videos and sourdough starters, sailors in the 19th century had to get creative with what was at hand. Some would illustrate in their journals, or decorate the handles of their sea chests. Others would engage in the classic maritime art form of scrimshaw.
The teeth came from the lower jaws of sperm whales, because the upper jaws don't have any.
Whale teeth could be acquired either in the act of whaling or purchased at one of many ports along a sailor's journey.
They'd begin by sanding and polishing the surface of a tooth. And then they'd scratch a picture into it with a penknife or one of the shipboard tools.
Pictures of people back home, beautiful tropical islands, and whatever they would have been dreaming about.
And I can picture the artist sort of running his finger along a sooty lamp chimney or the
top of the cook stove to get some blacking into the lines that they'd scratched in and rub it in. And voila, he had a souvenir that was emblematic of his voyage.
According to Dan, one of the most intriguing pieces of scrimshaw in PEM's collection involves a ship called the Susan out of Nantucket by a scrimshander named Frederick Myrick.
The scrimshaw is very highly detailed and highly informative. He recorded all kinds of information. He put a portrait of the ship itself, the Susan. On one side, it's hunting for whales. On the other side, it's on the coast of Japan. He put a poem on it. Oh boy, long life to killers, success to sailors' wives, and greasy luck to whalers. And there's one more line in there I'm blanking on.
On this voyage, Myrick actually made several identical pieces.
It's really fascinating to think, why would he have made this tooth? And why would he have made several that essentially look the same, except they have different dates on them? I'm sort of enthralled by this theory that a collector once gave to me without any evidence at all. I will point out it's just speculation.
You can just imagine. You've sailed from Nantucket to the middle of the Pacific. Your days consist of hunting for whales, butchering whales, and boiling down their blubber.
And after days or weeks, over the horizon, another sail is sighted. You sail in closer to it, and you see an American flag, and you sail in even closer, and you realize it's a ship from New England, Nantucket, or even Salem. And you know some of the people on board, so the two ships tie up, and everybody has a party in the middle of the Pacific. They called it a gam.
And the captain of the Susan, Captain Swain, had this scrimshander on board, Myrick, and Myrick makes him one of these pieces as a gift to the passing ship.
And he hands it off to the captain of the other ship and shakes his hand and says, "It's been nice seeing you here. Here's a souvenir of our little gam here."
And maybe that's why Myrick had made so many. It's like a ship's calling card.
A memento of having run into Captain Swain and the ship Susan in the middle of the Pacific. Out in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the night, seeing an incredible wealth of stars, way beyond what can ever be seen on land. It's hard to ground yourself in a way. It's hard to orient yourself towards where you are going. If you go below and you come up, everything is turned around. It's a sense of distancing that can't even be imagined on land. There isn't any place that's so disorienting.
Here in the spring of 2020, we are feeling a bit of this disorientation. News and headlines fuel our uncertainty and keep us off balance. The ground below us seems to be moving.
Under these constraints, we seek more than ever to connect with friends and family, and whenever possible, to celebrate.
So today's my daughter's 12th birthday. We're going to have a birthday party for her. All of her friends who were supposed to come to the house will be connecting via Skype or FaceTime, and they'll all sing to her, and we'll cut the cake, and they'll have a grand old time, but not as grand as if all of her friends could actually have a piece of that cake. So looking at the upside of the situation, that means there's more cake for me. Otherwise, who knows if I even would have gotten a slice. Blast away.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Here, hey guys. Here, have a look at the cake.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. You know, PEM was founded on the idea that life at sea was hard. It was hard on sailors and their families. The sea promised neither wealth nor safe passage, and so the museum's founders offered aid to those who lost their fortunes or their loved ones to the sea.
Today, during these uncertain times, PEM is once again offering its support. When listeners like you buy or renew your membership to PEM, the museum will give a free membership to caregivers at North Shore Medical Center.
If you are interested in learning about PEM's maritime origins, there's a great new book available. Collecting the Globe was written by our own Associate Curator of Exhibitions and Research, George Schwartz, and it's available online in the PEM shop or wherever you find good books.
Special thanks to John Newman of the National Park Service, and of course to Dan Finamore. If you have comments or story ideas, or if you want to share what you're doing during this health crisis, write to us at PEMcast@pem.org. Find out what PEM is doing during this closure at PEM.org, and keep in touch with us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Stay tuned for more episodes of the PEMcast.